evening, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday, March 17th, 2020 Select Board meeting, which is in turbulent times, I have to tell you. It's an interesting situation. A lot is going on. I'm Tim. I'm your captain tonight. And I just wanted to let you know that we know the meeting has been properly warned because we assembled it at 5:15 to go do interviews, but actually the interviews didn't happen. A little bit more on that later. And then we went into executive session to address some issues. So at this point, I just want to see if anyone could make a motion to approve the minutes of February 18th.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes from February 18th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's 3-0. Well, I just found out recently I was becoming chairing today, so I don't have really fully formed remarks, but I do want to say a couple words that we're all going through a lot of emotional distress right now, I think. Speaking for my family and a lot of the people I know, there is a lot to think about and a lot coming at us as far as information. The way I kind of see this, and I'm sure everybody's heard this phrase, is that this is sort of a long rolling snowstorm that we can't see. It's like an invisible storm that we are all weathering. I think it's a great time to live that edict that we are Vermont strong. We want to check in on our neighbors. We want to take care of each other in a lot of the same ways we would take care of each other for a natural disaster. But we also want to stay calm because we need to really be there for people and to be there for our families and each other and our neighbors. We need to be informed, but we don't need to panic. I have learned a lot, I'm sure a lot of us have learned a lot about COVID-19, which we're all dealing with. And I want to remind people that it's not an airborne pathogen like measles is. For all we know about it, which is still, there's a lot to be discovered, it's not like measles where you could be in the same room with someone and contract the virus just by being near them. The distancing is because there can be surfaces that get droplets, and you touch surfaces and you share and you touch your face. And I think that's something really important to remember because I see a lot on social media and just being out in the public a little bit, talking to people, of people kind of being afraid of each other and afraid of the normal interactions. And I really think we should resist that. There's other ways to safely interact. You see that we're spaced a little bit further apart here, and everybody's doing, different kinds of elbow bumps or live long and prospers and things like that. But there's a lot of vulnerable people in our community that still need our help, and we're figuring out ways to do that. And we're here tonight, and you're here, thank you, the public who is here tonight, because we are weighing risks, and risks, you can't eliminate risk anywhere in your life. That's just a misnomer that some people have. So what we're trying to do is reduce risk and still get the essential functions of the town going. And let's keep our first responders in our thoughts and our medical professionals because their risk is way up here. And we're all here moving the town forward and taking a little bit of a risk to be together. And that's a good thing, I think. So let's just keep our heads together, and I think we're going to come out stronger on the other end. And that's all I have to say. I'm kind of rambling now, but that's the chair's remarks today. And I was also buying time because Peter had
Thank you very much for buying time and for inspirational remarks. I apologize. I had an important couple of papers that were back in the office, so I needed to run and grab them. I have done that. And I don't have town manager's comments about general topics this evening. I'll have plenty to say about COVID-19 under the agenda item.
Great. Do we have any other fellow select board members' comments or committee reports? Nope. Only three of us. That's weird to get used to once in a while. How about in our public here at our meeting room. Anyone would like to say anything that doesn't have to do with an agenda item that's already coming later in the meeting? Anybody at all? Yeah. Oh, right to the mic. Yes, if you don't mind. Again, it won't amplify your voice, but it will allow everyone viewing remotely, which may be a few people tonight. Just remind us your name and where you live.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Howes. I'm a resident of Brattleboro. I reside in the South Main Street neighborhood. And I've been thinking that it would be good to liberate the neighborhood of the drop-in center activities and to relocate those needs to another address in town, perhaps the CF Church building for offices and case management, or to project further south, further north, to an area opposite the Hannafords, or to allow for an expanded housing unit, which I think is what is declared for the 54 address in South Main Street, that it would be large enough and would not be a large enough area, land area, would not be imposing upon the neighborhood. I've been on South Main Street for 23, 24 years, and I think it's time to liberate the neighborhood to believe in it as a residential area. I really, just the other day, I was walking down towards the co-op, and I must have picked up 85 cigarette butts littered both sides of the street like, like breadcrumbs all the way down. It just seems sort of, it's just tedious, a little thing, but it's so constant, and it's been constant for over these decades. I feel that the neighborhood needs to be able to think of it, the neighborhood, as residential. While the town still applies to the needs of persons who feel a need to be collective winter housing, as in the Austin campus, which I think it's good. They're a sector of population, of people, a time in your life when you just don't want to do anything. You just want to be able to lay down at night and just be able to be undisturbed during the day. It's I think we need to keep the Austin campus in mind. I think it's been good, and it's not that much of a burden to the community, to the grants for support for the drop-in center provisions. And then to move on, well, the second or the future address for drop-in center may be Home Depot. That's a very big building. And maybe across the street, a brand new spot right next to China Garden. There hasn't been anything there for decades, and it hasn't even been a parking lot. And it's just flat and wide open, and it could take a housing square very nicely. My second issue is during these rinsing of the public virus, that we consider the needs of the pets, perhaps through like a town ordinance, that our pets are treated for any wandering viruses that they may be carrying, that we consider cortisone treatments or antiviral treatments in the form of food drops that you could put on like a little biscuit or a little administer at meal times. That the pets, that we raise our awareness about pet health and consider that our pets need as much attention as are total strangers who are not really sure where to begin with treatment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Anyone else like to say anything about anything else that's not on the agenda? No? I think we're hoping to do a slight change in the agenda if no one has any objections. I think everyone wants to hear our COVID-19 update, if that's all right with my fellow members. And then we'll move into the water and sewer commissioners.
Great.
So, Peter?
Thank you. So first and foremost, what I want to strongly encourage everyone to do in terms of access to accurate, reliable, current information about this, and particularly about how it is affecting us in town, because there's so much information in so many different places about literally worldwide impacts and certainly national impacts. I want to urge everyone to rely on the town's website, and I want to acknowledge that that we have a website that is in many ways out of date and kind of clunky, and we've talked about it here, and it's a priority for us in town government moving forward that we need to do a total overhaul of the website to make it more user-friendly. There's a lot of really valuable information there, but it can be sometimes hard to find that information. And so what I want to do is make sure that the community is aware that we have fixed that as it relates to COVID-19. It's going to be a longer haul to fix it in total. But for this moment, when it's so important, there's so much flying around and so much of that information is not current or accurate or reliable. We feel like it's really critically important that people know that there's a source here locally where you can go and check in daily and learn about what is happening, what is changing, what's moving on. And so we've built it in a way where on the town's homepage, smack in the center of it, there's a set of boxes related to COVID-19 and some summary information there, but mostly what it is access. Down 3 boxes on the right-hand side, you can get to the Vermont Department of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on the national level, and the World Health Organization for the worldwide perspective. So those sites are being updated all the time by teams of experts. So on the health side of this, what we know, what we don't know, how it's spreading, what people can do about it to protect themselves. There's 3 direct links there, depending on whether you want to go into the state level, the national level, or the world level. On the left-hand side, there's a town updates box, and there is information, 2 other boxes where there's information specific to businesses and resources that businesses can access because of the significant concerns we'll speak about in more detail in a few moments about the impact that this will have on our economy. And also for individuals and families, a separate box to resources that people in the community can draw upon for human needs that are not organizational needs, but are at the family and individual level. Those 2 areas are going to be built up as time goes on. There's already some information there, and as time goes on, we're going to be making sure that well-vetted, valuable, accurate information gets added for the resources available to businesses and the resources available to individuals. The town's update portion, we are producing now a daily update of what's happening in town government, both over these last few days. The major emphasis has been on how we have been gearing down normal functions of town government and gearing up emergency functions of town government. And as we go forward, it'll be relatively more stable information from day to day, but you can go there every single afternoon and see an update. Anything that is new today is highlighted in yellow, so it jumps right off the page. And then there'll continue to be the summaries of what's happening. And we've divided it into emergency services and non-emergency and administrative support services. So welcome to any input that we might receive from the community about ways in which this could be enhanced, things that might make it even better. But our purpose in establishing it over the last couple of days has been to make sure that there is one site here in town provided by town government that's available for people to go to and know they can rely on that as being accurate information. From today's update, posted a couple of hours ago, back at 2:45 today, the main information I want to share, there's a couple of new developments today. We made a decision earlier today to suspend parking enforcement for the foreseeable future. So Until further notice is a term we're going to be really familiar with here, because there's just no way of knowing, whether this is a weeks-long or months-long situation we're going to be dealing with. We know it's going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And so we're using just, the things that we're suspending from normal operations, we're just saying until further notice. We'll be really transparent and use our community megaphone to make sure that we push out loudly into the community when things are gearing back up to something more normal. But parking enforcement is something we decided today to discontinue until further notice. By tomorrow, the equipment out there will actually be showing people that parking is free. But in the meantime, earlier today, we stopped patrolling for parking and issuing tickets. And there's a separate news release that's out that I won't go further into the details of that right now, but that describes how we will still continue to enforce for things that aren't about timed parking, but are about things like not parking by hydrants and safety issues like that. So anyway, there's details about that that'll be coming out to the community, hopefully in the media tomorrow. And then we also have effective tomorrow morning, so basically effective immediately since the offices are closed for today, we won't be selling pay-as-you-throw bags individually anymore at the Gibson-Aiken Center and here at the Treasurer's Office in the Municipal Center. And the reason we won't be doing that is because all of our town facilities will be closed to the public beginning tomorrow morning. Many places actually closed yesterday based on the additional reduced numbers, the advice that's coming from the health experts about how many people should gather in a particular place. We didn't do that because we had this meeting tonight and we didn't want there to be confusion about whether or not the building would be open for people to come. So we made Wednesday morning the effective time of our closing of all of our public facilities. But they will be closed until further notice. Town government will go on. We're inviting people, please, to remain in touch with us for the things you need from us. By mail, by phone, by email. There are ways in which we will still be providing services from town facilities, but the public won't be able to come into town facilities in order to, again, just reduce the risk and hopefully help to flatten the curve of the spread of the virus. Because of that, the town has always maintained these two locations where we sell individual bags so people don't have to go to a retail establishment and buy them 5 at a time. For the time being, we just won't be able to offer that service. That's going to be something where people will need to go to the retail establishments. The retail establishments will still be selling the bags, and they can be purchased in packets of 5. Beyond that, reminders from today. So those are the two things that were new today. Tomorrow, as I said, is when the closures go into full effect. Just a couple of reminders that have been in this report for the last couple of days, but for people who may not have been reading it, we want you to know that dispatch is now screening every call that comes in for potential COVID-19 implications so that word can be transferred out to the first responders about how to put the special procedures into place when necessary to protect themselves and the broader public when dealing with a case that might be COVID-19. And as the first responders arrive at any of these calls where there is potential hazard, they're going to go into a home and they don't know for sure exactly what they're encountering. They're doing what they call doorway assessments. Upon arrival, they're making sure that they have a better understanding of who needs what kind of help and what the experience of that household has been related to this virus. On non-emergency and administrative support functions, a couple of highlights. There's quite a lot more information in this daily update that we're putting out, so I'd urge people to go and take a look at that. But a couple of highlights that we thought people should be aware of are that the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment facilities are both operating under special procedures that have been established in close communication with health authorities and the regulatory authorities at the state. It takes very specialized skills and training to operate these facilities, and obviously they are critically important to community health, to have the water plant continue to function effectively, providing the clean and potable water for us, and then wastewater treatment on the outflow side. And so we're making sure that the relatively small teams in a small community like ours are healthy, but based on how we're rotating shifts and how we're also communicating with other providers and with the state to make sure that backup resources are available should that become necessary. There'll be ways in which communities are collaborating throughout this, actually, in all different kinds of functions, in ways that we see often in mutual aid for public safety, less often in municipal collaboration around non-emergency services. We'll see more of it as we deal with COVID-19. So we wanted to reassure everybody that special actions have been taken to protect the functioning of the water treatment operation and the wastewater treatment operation. And then on the enrichment side, as opposed to the basic services side, both the library and the recreation and parks programming are closed, unfortunately. It's just not safe for us to be inviting people to come together for the purposes that those important institutions provide. The Recreation and Parks Department is still taking registration online and by mail. And the library is providing services, takeout services. So if you communicate with the library and you reserve a book or some other resource they have available, someone will come out and meet you at the door to hand it to you so that people can still at least borrow from the library. Everything's being really thoroughly cleaned, obviously, in between uses. But the institutions themselves, the buildings and the activities that go on that are so vital to our community life are closed until further notice. We are communicating, town officials are, in a variety of ways, select board members, staff members, with various people and organizations in the community around how they're coping with this and different levels of support that are being provided in all different kinds of ways in our community. Some people have just organically created new networks of folks that are helping to support one another through this. And then there's also sort of reliable institutions in our community that have been set up to provide a safety net and support for various types of individuals and organizations, and those are obviously in place in a very active way, and the town government is interacting and supporting those efforts and trying to make sure that needs that go far beyond our normal sort of community needs are being met. We also have canceled until further notice any meeting of a town board, committee, or commission other than this select board and the action that this select board will be taking later this evening regarding representative town meeting. So representative town meeting hasn't been officially canceled, but it will need to be because of the prohibition of having a gathering of anything more than 50 people. The board will be taking that official action this evening. And then for the time being, until further notice, the select board meetings will be the only meetings of public meetings of town boards that will be ongoing. These are necessary, obviously, in order to keep the business of government operational through these extraordinary times. As we come up with ways to provide electronic access to the public and potentially for electronic functioning of the members of boards and commissions, then there will be a ramping back up of the operations of those groups as well. But at this time, for the foreseeable future, for this moment, it's just the select board. I'd like to ask Mike Bacassi to come up and speak to the emergency service delivery and to the supplemental community services that are being activated through the fire department and other town services. And before Mike speaks, I just want to make something really clear to the community that is clear and very appreciated to all of us on the town team. While you know him as the fire chief, we know him that way too, but also as the town's emergency management director, and that's usually a really quiet role that has to do with a lot of planning and sometimes some training. At this moment in time and extraordinary moments like this, we look to Mike for the leadership that he provides and is providing related to COVID-19 to make sure that in a broader than normal way, our emergency services are delivered to the community to meet the high demands of such extraordinary circumstances. So thank you, Mike, for the incredible job you're doing, and please inform us about what that entails on the emergency side.
Thank you. Though I've got to say this hasn't come without a lot of help from outside agencies and within my own department. Assistant Chief Howard's been a huge help. BMH and Rescue Inc. both have had a lot of input into what's happening in the town. I hope to give you that broad perspective of what is going on in town. I really don't want to get down into the weeds. Things are changing very, very rapidly. I sent the town manager our town situational report at about 2 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, the first update came out from the state, and things are different already. From 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, things have changed a lot. On the local side, for the local update, I'm glad to say, and I think this is very important, that we have no known cases of COVID-19 in Brattleboro. Though we may not know about them if it happens, usually we pick up on it, but right now there's absolutely no sign that it's in town as far as patients. Local EMS, we've responded to several cases that sounded good, if you will, sounded very close to the symptoms. They've all proved negative. A plan's being developed to get out to the elderly and to the medically compromised. These are the high-risk groups for this virus. Assistant Chief Howard is leading that program. He's developing a plan and an outreach to see what we can do to help them. A lot of them I'm sure we're gonna see down the road, they're afraid to go out, and we want to be there to help that group to get the needs that that they need, such as medicines, even groceries. If we need to figure out a way to get them food, we'll make it happen. There's a group that's being pulled together, led by Rihanna from Groundworks. It's being called the Homeless Response Team. Our first meeting was Monday. What's today? Yeah. Was yesterday, and
It was like a week ago.
yeah. That's going to be, it's going to be a grassroots group, I think, led by Rihanna and Groundworks. So far, I think that's been our speed bump in all of this, is that we're having some issues pulling the plans together for that. But we're starting to get some leads on how we can work through that, and I think that hopefully by this time tomorrow we'll have a better direction on where that's all going. Some of the municipal actions that I've kind of highlighted, being very cautious not to speak for all the other emergency departments, but yet to give a broad statement that there has been no interruption in emergency response in this town. We have taken steps to minimize exposure of our staffs to, if you will, to the public. We're trying to minimize the social gatherings, the social contact. Some of the things that we're doing to help as a reach out, as of this morning, it's all been confirmed. We're using both fire stations starting tomorrow as distribution points for the school lunch program. They're going to be set up. Lunches will be brought in and handed out from both fire stations by the school district with the help of staff. Captain Emery is doing the organizing with the school district on that program, and all three captains on the days they're on duty will oversee it. BCTV has graciously given us remote access to their software, and we are now putting informational messages and a scrolling banner on both of their channels to keep the public informed of information they may need to reach out to different agencies where they can get help, and obviously emergency messages that may come up. So like I said, the emergency services, there's no interruptions. We're operating normally. There's been some adjustments. Some of the support service functions, if you will, inspections on the police side, car unlocks, VIN checks, all of that stuff has been suspended for now. And dispatch, as the town manager said, they're screening every single call now that comes into dispatch. They're screening for COVID. And the reason for that is because a couple of times now we've kind of had a scare where a call's come in a different way. EMS has got there, and in talking to the patient, they actually screened very close to COVID symptoms. So we've decided every single call will get screened, and that's why we're doing the doorway assessments when it's not life-threatening. All of the essential services, if you will, either have or they're presently working on staffing plans for continuity of operations. So if a majority of our staff goes down, we have backup plans to keep all of those services not only staffed safely but operational. Brattleboro Memorial Hospital has taken several steps during this. They have now activated their ELC and put their incident command system in place. They are doing drive-up testing, and that's being done as an outpatient service, and only when it's ordered by a patient's primary care physician. So you can't drive up and just request a test. It needs to be ordered by the doctor. And as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, they've administered approximately 75 tests. Access to the hospital has been limited to the main entrance of the hospital and the ER. Everything else has been locked up. At the front ER entry, all people going into the ER are being screened. And if they screen positive for possible COVID, then they're sent back around to the outside of the building, to the emergency ambulance docks, where they've got the testing set up there before they're allowed into the hospital. And then there's a lot of other safety steps. One of the big things that I learned today, BMH now has an agreement with Grace Cottage to handle overflow. So if this really blows up in our faces, and I hope I can explain this right so it's not confusing. The simplest way to explain this is that BMH is going to keep all of the COVID patients here in Brattleboro. All of the inpatients, for whatever reason, are going to go to Grace Cottage. And the reason for that is because BMH has the abilities to draw negative pressure on 2 of their ER rooms, and then a good portion of the second floor can be pulled into negative pressure, which will contain the virus there. Rescue Inc. has taken a lot of the same steps we have. Their quarters is closed to the public. All of their on-site classes have been canceled. Obviously, they've implemented a lot of infection control measures, and like us, they're limiting the number of providers that are coming in contact with a patient that screens positive. Some of the numbers, I'm sure, do you have this update in front of you? I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. No, Peter says. As of 1 o'clock this afternoon, the count in Vermont has gone up to 10 cases that have tested positive. And at 1 o'clock, they had 4 non-residents that had tested positive. We're now up to 7 as of just before I came here. Some of those non-residents are being isolated in Vermont homes, and others have gone back to their main home. In the United States, very quickly, total death count, if you will, is now 75 people, which is up from 68 from the last. One of the things I would say we keep hitting a speed bump on, and we're working very hard on this one because it's going to take a little bit of planning, is the isolation, monitoring, and quarantine of the homeless if they get sick or are exposed to the virus. We're working on sites and how to staff those sites. We've been in contact with the state. Rihanna's reached out to a lot of private entities, and we still have a couple to contact, and hopefully we'll get some of that solved tomorrow. I don't know if you want to say any more on that, Rihanna, or?
I'm happy to, and I know we're speaking a little later, so.
I think it would be fine, yeah, if you'd like to say a couple words on that subject. I have a feeling maybe there might be a couple other questions, and it's all related to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speak now versus later.
Sure, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I'm Rihanna from Groundworks. So to kind of sum up all of our programs as a whole, we moved last week to start restricting out external visitors into our programs and started making lots of changes rapidly. Over the weekend, we were one of the homeless shelters identified. There's 4 areas across the state based on the capacity and the number of folks that we serve that were identified as high risk. And so we started moving folks from our spaces who are identified as hyper vulnerable, so over the age of 60 or experiencing underlying medical conditions, to motel rooms where they could isolate if need be. I do want to emphasize that no one in our programs are sick or showing any signs of symptoms at the moment. So we moved folks out of our programs to reduce the number of people so we could align with state guidance that we're receiving about how many folks we should be serving in our programs and precautions that we can take. Things like making sure in our year-round shelter that folks can have individual bedrooms as much as possible should people get sick, and that we're protecting those who are most at risk. Changes as of today, we closed the drop-in center and moved to the seasonal overflow shelter, where we're now running that shelter 24/7 in order to reduce the number of sites that we have, to make sure that we are staying fully staffed as things continue to change, and to cut down on the transportation back and forth. So our shelters, folks are moving in and out of, but in kind of greatly reduced amounts, so that we're trying to have folks have less contact with the community at large and lower the risk that way. One of the pieces, to Chief Bucassi's point, is that we convened a homeless response team. There is also a statewide homeless response task force that we are connected to, and I am the liaison to that group and then to the community at large. Out of that group, we have a number of committees, so working on general communications to try to streamline information and the delivery of that information to the community at large. A food committee working on food across the continuum from seniors down to kiddos. Our food shelf moved to a delivery-only model for its beginning this week, and so we have volunteers that we screen who are now delivering food to folks to cut down on the travel of folks and make sure everyone has food. Other committees include working on a congregate site should people get sick, what that would look like, and we're working with state partners who've given guidance around that, and working to identify a site and to ensure that we have backup staffing for all of our shelters should things start to look more dire. So lots of precautionary measures to be as safe as possible while also still operating programs and caring for folks at the same time. I think those are all the main pieces I have.
Thank you both. I actually had a question for, well, actually it could be either of you, because I think Liz and I were both lucky enough to be able to attend your first meeting, and thank you for facilitating that. I meant to bring a note, and in the rush to come here, I forgot to bring it, but there was some information passed along that I think is really important for anybody who doesn't have a primary care provider, which
Sure.
is a shockingly large number. I don't know the
Yes.
number, but a lot of people out there fall through the cracks of having a PCP. And without the PCP, it's sometimes questionable whether you can get the test approved. Do you happen to have that? There's a number that people can call?
Yes, so there's a couple of pieces, which reminds me of the other piece. In terms of volunteer management, we're really working to streamline volunteers, not just related to folks who are struggling with homelessness, for the community at large. And so Jen Jacobs has a great survey with a team of folks that she's put together. We have a volunteer management committee, and we're really trying to direct people to that survey, both to express if they can volunteer and also for community members in need of support, regardless of what that support need is, to that one central place, and then working on how information is shared from there.
Excuse me for interrupting
Yeah.
you, but right there, while folks are paying attention to that point, I want to say that a link to that survey is in the information for individuals and families on the town's website. So if folks want to participate in that, either offering services or if folks need services, they can access that survey by going to the town site.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another thing I wanted to add was that so many of the volunteers for Meals on Wheels and so forth are over 60
Yes.
now. And so you're looking for people who are under 60.
Yep, so we're screening volunteers out, much as we love and appreciate them. Our volunteer population at large in our community is largely in the at-risk population, so over 60 are struggling with underlying medical needs. And so we're asking those folks to please stay at home and let us help care for them, and asking younger folks who may have more time and capacity to step into those roles. And so that's part of the screening process that we're using, and additional processes to make sure we're not kind of furthering potential spread of how volunteers are dropping off and those sorts of things. To Tim's point, the piece around medical care is that BMH offers access to their team of providers, so through all of their practices, through the centralized scheduling department. I could look up the direct number for that, but
I
the
have the
hospital,
number.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
It's 251-8777.
Yes. So folks can call to access getting a primary care provider set up. Typically that comes with a pretty lengthy application. In the meantime, folks without a primary care provider can call, get connected to an acute care visit if needed, or get advice about what next steps they should take if they are exhibiting symptoms, rather than showing up at the emergency department. And if folks are struggling with needing health insurance or getting connected to a PCP, connecting with us at Groundworks, we can help get them out to the right person or provide that support directly to folks.
Thank you. And thank you for all your work on your end around this.
Thank you.
It's been great. And also I wanted to say happy birthday, because I happen to know that you're...
Thank you. Strangest birthday of all time.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to celebrating next year.
Well, try to all celebrate with you when we're through this next year. Mike, do you have more to add? Thank you for that.
That's the short story of a whole lot of information that is constantly changing. I'll go out on a limb here, and I'll say that I feel good about where we are right now as far as our planning in the town government and for the town itself. Department-wise, the only fear I have is protective equipment. Though we haven't used a whole lot yet, I think we're going to, and there's truly a shortage out there. The state has requested surplus from the national stockpile, but I think that their priority is going to be for the hospitals, understandably. So we're just going to do our best, and we'll figure it out going along.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's always tough. We've been getting, the select board has been getting all of these pieces of information, and just to bring it all together and decide what's important, what's not important can be difficult. So thank you, Mike.
A couple of things to finish
Yeah,
up.
I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention one quick thing that segues from the description about the supplemental community services that we've just been discussing, and then hit a couple of other very specific pieces of this that are of great concern to a lot of folks in the community, and I've had a lot of inquiries about. The one additional tidbit is one of the services that has changed but is still being provided is the senior meals. And so while the senior center has to be closed for obvious reasons, for the protection of the clients there, and because it's part of the town facilities that are closed overall, still the service is being provided both through takeout and some delivery of the meals. And today they had a total of over 125 meals. So the folks who are making that program happen are still making it happen in a way that's having a significant positive impact for some of the most highly at-risk people in our community. And then two additional things I wanted to address are the concerns about the devastating impact that this can have for businesses in our community and every community, and the question about electronic communication, specifically as it relates to the holding of public meetings. So I want to just let folks know where we are related to those two items. The business piece is daunting. There are businesses in this community whose very existence is threatened by the magnitude of this crisis. And that's going to be true in every community across the country, which means then, the federal resources that are brought to bear and the state resources that are brought to bear around Vermont, all are going to have to factor in the fact that there is some degree to which the magnitude of the threat that this poses to our economy, and, saying it's the economy is a really sort of big amorphous thing, but when we drill down to street level in small communities and small businesses operating on a particularly small margin, the threat to real people and the fabric of our community is there. So that's a real threat, and it's not a threat that we can just mitigate in the way that we can some other aspects of this by just being smart and taking some unusual actions. But there are efforts that are underway already, recognizing that situation and knowing that there's going to be great need. Under the federal and state emergency declarations and emergency legislation that is being developed, some of it has already been acted upon. A good bit more is just in the works. At both the federal and state level, it appears that there is some help on the way, but it will at least initially be loans, not grants. And so businesses that apply for and receive that help will be taking on some additional burden as they operate into the future. But it's early in this crisis, and there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly what the details of that help from higher levels of government is going to be. In order to make sure that we at least have local businesses well informed and able to plug into the resources that will become available, the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, BDCC, which is the economic development agency for our region, is leading a regional effort to plug into those services. It involves the town, it involves the Chamber of Commerce, the DBA, and a variety of other organizations and local, state, and federal officials who together are trying to make sure that we have up-to-date, accurate information and are pushing that out in an effective manner to the businesses so that folks can connect to the local and state, or rather the state and federal resources that are becoming available. The big question that we're being asked is, what about local resources? Can't the town jump in to provide direct assistance to businesses here in town? And the challenge there for us is that we're so very early in a very long process, most of which we can't predict how it's going to unfold, either for individual businesses, the business community collectively, or the community more broadly. And so with the town's limited resources, making decisions literally in the first week of the full-on emergency that we're experiencing in Brattleboro. Some other places are farther along, but it's really, when you think about a week ago, Wednesday night, 6 nights ago, we were at Academy School holding the information meeting for town meeting. We knew that it was only a matter of time. We knew this thing was coming, but it's really in those last 6 days and more in the last 4 days or so that it is just suddenly, the world upside down for us. And so being this early in this process makes it difficult for the town to make concrete decisions of applying the limited resources that we have to do this or to do that. And so we have taken some limited action. There's another proposal that we have before the select board this evening related to some direct things that we can do because of ongoing relationships we have with certain businesses where the town has provided funding to assist those businesses in either starting up or expanding. But in the broader perspective, what we're trying to do is be a constructive part of the communication right now to help businesses access the help that is going to become available through the federal government and the state government. And then over time, see, in the broader context of everything that's going to need to be done for the health, safety, and welfare of the whole community, what resources the town may be able to provide in specific ways further down the road in this emergency to local businesses. So those will be things that will definitely be still interacting with the business community around, and Select Board certainly will be considering as we go forward. On the electronic communications piece, we've had a lot of communication from folks. I know there's a level of frustration for some people in the community tonight, so if you're one of those people and you're listening on BCTV right now, I say to you, I understand that there are tools available where people can plug into a meeting like this remotely, and I want to make really clear why the town has moved cautiously in implementing those tools. So while there's a variety of different ways, some of them really powerful to connect people individually and in private meetings and organizations, those don't involve, those connections don't involve the open meetings law. We've got an obligation to make sure that we hold public meetings where we're doing the public's business in a manner that complies with Vermont's open meetings law, not just because that's the right thing to do, and government should set the right example by following all of the rules that are applicable to us, just as we expect people in the community to follow the rules that we make. But also specifically because the intent of that rule is to make sure that our public decision-making processes are open and fair, and that people in the community have an opportunity, an equal opportunity to participate. And our great concern is that for meetings of the magnitude that we hold with that special public obligation, we need to be sure that we can honor the letter of the law as it relates to the open meetings law. But we also need to be sure that the tool we use actually can allow for a manageable meeting, that the person who's in charge of calling on people can be calling on people in an orderly manner so that everyone has a fair opportunity to participate. And so that the decision makers actually all are equally participating, hearing everything that's being said, and in a position where their votes can be counted. So there may come a time as this evolves where even the decision-making participants of the meeting are remote. But as of right now, Vermont law requires that public meetings be held in a physical location. It does allow that those meetings in a physical location can allow people to connect in remotely. And we are actively researching the tools that are available to allow people to connect in remotely, so that by the time we actually commit to one, we have a very high level of confidence it won't lead to chaos, but rather will lead to orderly, constructive community participation in the meetings. So for tonight, we did this the old-fashioned way, and thank you to those of you who have come. To those of you who felt you had to stay home, we totally understand that. We hope that as soon as 3 weeks from tonight, when the next regularly scheduled select board meeting is on the calendar for April 7th, that by that time and maybe sooner, we'll be in a position where we know what tool we will use to allow for remote communication into these meetings, so that we can make sure that it is easier and safer for people to participate.
Thank you.
Having said all of that, we have 3 actions that we are asking the select board to take tonight, and then a 4th that we want to make sure is understood to be available to the board. One of these will require action as water and sewer commissioners, so I'm going to speak to the first 2 and the catch-all item. And then when your water and sewer commissioners here in a few minutes, we can address the other recommendation. Staff is recommending the cancellation of the representative town meeting scheduled for Saturday, March 21st, because of the fact that it would violate, and aside from the fact that it's just, I think, common sense at this point, given the necessity of social distancing, it actually would violate the governor's order at this point that no public gatherings exceed a maximum of 50 people. So we'd ask that you take that official action. Our plan will be, if you do agree with this way of moving forward, we can't be sure that we would be able to hold a representative town meeting by May 9th, but obviously we will need to hold one as soon as we are able to hold one safely and in accordance with the emergency regulations. And so if the situation improves quickly enough that we're able to hold a representative town meeting on May 9th, we think you should. And the reason for that is beyond May 9th, there are technical details I don't think we need to go into tonight, but related to the town's own obligation under our charter and our statutory obligation, where there's timeframes after town meeting acts when certain things are appealable. And in order to now allow enough time for those other processes to play out if necessary, May 9th would be the last time we could hold a representative town meeting this year and still have those other processes be completed by the beginning of the new fiscal year on July 1st. So we can go deeper into those weeds when you're actually having to make a decision about warning the town meeting. What we want to do is just make sure that the community is aware. We're keenly looking at those deadlines and at holding the representative town meeting at the first opportunity. But for now, because we don't really know when that opportunity will be, we think you should just cancel Saturday's meeting. And we are hopeful that the circumstances will be appropriate, that we can bring you a warning for the April 7th meeting, which would give the proper more than 30 and less than 40 days notice for a May 9th representative town meeting.
Did you want to go through these
Sure.
recommendations?
Absolutely.
Totally, because I would love to hit the pause button, just make sure that everybody here has a chance to ask
Yep.
any questions, make sure the fellow board members have
That's a
chance.
good point.
So
Yeah.
if you want to just outline for us, and then we'll just take it all as just a open question period.
Sure. So the second action we're asking for is that you authorize that recipients of small business assistant program loans from the town's program income be allowed to defer their loan payments until further notice. So this is one of those actions I mentioned in my comments earlier where because we are the maker of the loan, it's a action that is readily available to us, that doesn't involve creating some kind of new program of the town or a commitment to one segment of the community at the expense of another segment of the community. We have these loans out, we're going to be repaid. One of the ways in which we can actually increase the likelihood of being repaid is to help the businesses stay afloat, but more practically, because every business is going to be stressed by this, we think that this is low-hanging fruit and the appropriate thing for the town to do. And we're just asking that it be until further notice for the same reason as everything else is until further notice. We can't reasonably predict a time when it will be appropriate to bring the monthly payments of these loans back into action. We will work through this with those businesses and with you and bring that action back to you at an appropriate time. For tonight, we're asking that you just act to allow the recipients to cease paying on those loans until further notice. When you are water and sewer commissioners in a few minutes, we're going to ask that you suspend until further notice the shutoff of water service as a consequence of non-payment of utility fees. As a matter of fairness, it's one of the harder things we do in town government. It doesn't give anyone any pleasure to ever shut off water to a household or a business. But as a matter of fairness to all the ratepayers, we have to have requirements to pay or else the service ceases. There are ways in which folks can go onto payment plans and extend the time to get back in good standing. But when those fail, we have procedures for warning folks that there's going to be a shut off and then actually shutting off the water. We believe that in these extraordinary times, especially where hygiene is central to the community's well-being, but more generally just when there's going to be folks struggling economically in lots of different ways for lots of different reasons throughout the community, we believe the appropriate thing to do is to suspend any shutting off of water service until further notice. And the last action that we are not proposing, but sort of making sure is known, the select board members certainly know their role within the community. We just wanted to make sure that in these times when things are moving and changing so fast and there's a lot of action, a lot of decisions being made, under the declaration of emergency by Governor Scott, the town as a subdivision of the state is exercising some power to make decisions and take actions that are outside of the normal boundaries of our day-to-day operations. And so it's important in the oversight role that the select board has over town government that we make sure that it's clear that if you choose to provide any other direction as a select board to me and the town staff regarding modifying or adding to any of the emergency actions staff has taken, that we appreciate receiving that from you this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was a lot, but this is in the spirit of how everything's moving these days. A lot happens all at once. So I just to first open it up, I guess, to select board comment on any of the points of our COVID-19 update we just heard from Peter and Mike and Rihanna.
You go.
Now I got a list. Yeah, so as has already been said, you know, a lot has happened in the last several days, and it feels like a long time since we sat here, and it's kind of a different world right now. I'm really, really appreciative of all of the town staff for all the work that they're doing right now, in particular to our emergency management team. So I really appreciate the work that's happening. In the community, there are mutual aid efforts going on. Jennifer Jacobs is kind of one was referred to earlier, and just to reiterate what Peter was saying, there's a link on the town website for folks to sign up. So that's like volunteering to provide services to folks in the community. And also, you know, there's a way to communicate needs as well. And I would imagine that the fire department, through the work that they've been doing already, is kind of collecting kind of needs from folks through their non-emergency phone number. Is that right, Lenny? Yeah. And so, you know, it's uncomfortable maybe to say I have a need. I delivered some food for some people yesterday, and they were really grateful. And it was also, you know, it was a kind of an intense moment. And I think it's important that people feel okay to let folks know what their needs are, and there's many, many people in this community that are ready to step up and help out in whatever way they can. So I just want to kind of shine a light on that. The library, you know, is a really important resource in our community, and closing the library is not just about people losing access to reading material as easily as they would have had before. You know, it's also a place where people gather for meetings, but also gather for shelter. And so I'm pretty concerned about how that will impact folks' ability to stay warm, to stay safe. And I think that Rihanna already kind of spoke a little bit to some of the work that's happening there, so I'm really grateful for that. I guess one thing I wanted to kind of flag about the library is, you know, they're doing this takeout book service, and they also have online resources that you can access from your home if you have the internet using your library card. So if you don't have a New York Times subscription, that's fine. You can access it through the library website. They also have a subscription to the Reformer. There are websites where folks can do, you know, homeschooling and whatnot. So I just wanted to make sure people know about that. And then the other things I wanted to say are kind of questions, and some of them might not be answered in this room. I am really concerned about the economic impact of people being laid off from work or having their hours reduced by their work. Those people who are paid employees have recourse, in the most part, I believe, to unemployment insurance. The state has been making some pretty swift changes about unemployment insurance right now. So you can call and you can get in the process of applying for unemployment insurance if that's something that is available to you. And folks should not feel shy about that. I'm pretty concerned about people who aren't eligible for unemployment insurance, but who are losing access to their livelihood. So people who own their own business. We've already kind of talked a little bit about like what will the town's role be, and I know that we don't want to make any hard decisions right now, but I'm wondering what our community will look like in a few months' time after all this hopefully passes as easily as possible. And I hope that we can stay open to being flexible and nimble about our use of town funds to support people in those situations that don't have access to unemployment insurance. I want the BDCC to step up right now and support our local businesses in ways that go beyond just words. I want our state government to do the same thing. And obviously I want our federal government to do the same thing. I have a couple of concerns about vulnerable populations. So you mentioned already about the senior meals program, and I'm glad that that's continuing. I was concerned about that. I know that the fire department has been collecting information months back about folks that aren't able to leave their home as easily with mobility issues. And I hope that we'll continue to check in on those folks and make sure that they're getting what they need. And immunocompromised people in our community are obviously at great risk right now. I work next door to the AIDS Project, and I know that they're continuing to provide services. They also had a lot of people come into their office yesterday who really shouldn't have been coming there. That it would be safer for them to stay home. So I hope that as a community, we will support organizations that are providing meals to seniors, that are helping those with disabilities and those who are immunocompromised, to continue to deliver those services, and maybe to even increase those services at this time. And then the other population that I'm concerned about, those people that need to be accessing a medically assisted treatment program like those offered by Habit OPCO. Those folks are required to go to that site on a daily basis, and you can correct me if I get this wrong, please. And I hope that Habit OPCO will step up and make services available for people to take home rather than putting themselves in harm's way. And then the FoodWorks delivery service that you all are doing right now, I participated a little bit in that yesterday, and that's another thing that people should plug into if they can. Final thing I want to say that's about our town business. We talked about not proceeding with any water shutoffs for non-payment, and we talked about deferring small business assistance program loans. I wonder if there are other ways in which we can make it as easy for people right now. So if there are fines for like a late payment of a water and sewer bill, or a fine for late payment of taxes, if we could consider waiving those at this time. If there are other fees or anything that we are charging because of some kind of delinquency, that this might be a good moment to waive that. I'm glad that we're doing the shut off moratorium, I guess, and the free parking. And I want to encourage people to be reasonable about the free parking, right? Folks need to have access, and this isn't a time to just stick your car there and forget about it, and so be nice to each other. It's a crazy time right now, and I'm really hopeful that we will get through it unscathed as much as we can. You want to talk about evictions? Yeah, I'll talk about evictions. So I don't think that the town of Brattleboro has a role in pausing evictions. Bob, maybe you can speak to that. My understanding is that the state of New Hampshire passed an executive order yesterday that pauses all evictions in that state. And I would like to think that the state of Vermont can follow New Hampshire's lead in that regard.
That would have to come from the legislature on that, as the town does not control the law with respect to evictions. But certainly the legislature could take such an action when they reconvene.
Okay. All right, said my piece.
Okay. Well, I just want to say I'm grateful for all the work that's been done and all the information and everything from going to the website to calling your neighbor are all examples of community, and that's what we're here for, to care for each other. I'm in favor of all these motions, and thank you all very much.
Is anyone out there in our physical audience at the time who would like to speak to any of these discussed motions and ideas and information? Kate? Please let us know who you are.
I know the general. I'm Kate O'Connor. I'm from Brattleboro, and tonight I'm here on behalf of the Brattleboro Area Chamber of Commerce. And first, I do want to say thanks to the town for giving out concise, real, true information. Your website is great, and if there's anything that the chamber can do to help push out any information, we will do it. We're trying to send out a regular newsletter. We tweet and Facebook and everything. So if there's something that we can do for you, let us know.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I do appreciate Peter's comments and Daniel's comments about the business community. And that's why I wanted to, come here tonight and just stress and make sure you folks are aware of the anxiety that a lot of the businesses are feeling. As we know, bars and restaurants are closed, and the people that worked at those bars and restaurants are no longer employed. There are also theaters and other performance venues that are closed, and the people that are there aren't taking in a paycheck in most cases. The majority of the businesses in our town are small businesses, which means it's not just sometimes the employee is the owner, which puts an added strain. We've heard from multitude, or whatever the right adjective is, of businesses that they're not closed right now, but if they sell a product that people aren't buying because they either can't come out of their house or they don't have the money to purchase the product anymore, they're about to face laying people off and possible either temporary closure or permanent closure. So what I think we would like, and I was on the call today with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corp, and Peter and Patrick were on it too, and I can tell you, Daniel, I think that BDCC is stepping up. They've not only got Brattleboro involved, because they're a regional economic development organization, and they put all of us. The Downtown Alliance was on the call, the town of Brattleboro was on the call, the Brattleboro Chamber was on the call, as were representatives from Wilmington and Bellows Falls and Wyndham Regional Commission. And the problem that I think we're all having right now is there's so much information that's coming from so many places, and you turn on the TV and now there's going to $1 trillion from Congress. Hopefully that will pass and get somewhere. But I think what would be helpful from the Chamber's perspective, and I suspect from the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance's perspective, is if we could start the conversation with the town now about what the needs of the business community are. Because as I think Peter referenced, this is something, and both of you referenced in different ways, Daniel was saying this is a need that's now, and it's also going to be a need that's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and how many months down the way. So I'll just tell Peter maybe I could give him a call tomorrow, and possibly we could sit down and really start thinking it through now, because if we don't plan now, it's just going to, this whole thing is going to get worse for everybody. But if we can know what the end game or what our midpoint game is, working with the business community, it may alleviate a lot of the stress that people are feeling at this particular moment. So I appreciate your comments, and we'd love to work together and start working now. And, you know, I'll reiterate, if there's anything that the chamber can do to help the town, I tweeted out about free parking, you know, anything like that that is just helpful, we will do it. And I say that to Groundworks and anybody that's listening. If there's something that they need people to know and the chamber can help amplify that message, we will be there to do it.
Thank you.
So I'll call you tomorrow.
Good.
Mic drop.
I should have been the one that knows not to do that.
Anyone else would like to say anything about that big package of information and ideas just then? No? I think I just wanted to say that it feels like at the moment nothing that we have control over, which is a lot of people need to understand we have limited control in some areas and limited abilities in some areas. But I don't think anything that we have control over is off the table. We want to be talking about this stuff to the business community and our vulnerable populations and everybody who just is trying to survive this. That's the thing. I mean, I've talked to several business owners of restaurants today, actually, and they let me know that they're all sending out info via social media, whatever, personal appeals to support. If you can still afford to support your local restaurants through takeout, if they're still offering it, please do, because it's going to be a lifeline to get them through this time, hopefully. But even with that support, it's probably, some of them won't be able to hold out too long. So we hear this. That's all I wanted to say. So with this big list that we have, I think one of the easy decisions at the moment is maybe considering RTM. So I would entertain a motion for that portion of our recent discussion. Anybody want to?
Okay, Tim.
Thank you.
I move to cancel the representative town meeting scheduled for March 21st, 2020 at 8:30 a.m.
All right. Liz, this feels like a big thing. You know, it really is.
It is a big thing.
But it's something we have to do. If there's no other commentary on that, we have a motion to cancel representative town meetings, which is scheduled for March 21st. This is this coming Saturday at 8:30 a.m., which now seems completely impossible. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's 3-0. Jan? We also, I would entertain a motion concerning our small business assistance loan program.
I guess I'll do that one. I move to allow recipients of Small Business Assistance Program loans to defer loan payments until further notice.
All right, Daniel has made a motion to allow small business assistance loan program participants to defer their loan payments until further notice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's 3-0 as well. Does anyone feel the move that we should go ahead and make any other further motions amongst the board at this time, recognizing that it is very early in the landscape? So I think that's one of the things that I really am feeling right now. Things are moving so fast as far as the federal and the state support. We're not sure what we would be supporting or not supporting, but I think very soon we'll have a clearer picture of that. So, great. So that sort of does it with this COVID-19 section. Thanks for your patience, those of you who are here for other items. And our next item, item B, has to be postponed because we don't have...
I'm going to go back to
Yeah, we need to go back to water and sewer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm leaping ahead. We're going back to water and sewer commissioners. So do I have a motion to convene as water and sewer commissioners?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We are now water and sewer commissioners, and we have a couple of items that we need to consider.
Yeah, I think if it's okay with the board, I'd like to see you take action on the suspension of the shutoffs, because we've talked a lot about that already, and then we can move into the one item that had been agendaed for tonight. Water and
Indeed.
sewer.
Indeed, and whose turn
Shall
is
I
it?
make a motion?
Certainly, thank you, Liz.
I move to suspend until further notice the shut-off of water service as a consequence for non-payment of utility fees.
Thank you. Liz has made a motion to suspend until further notice the shut-off of water service as a consequence for non-payment of utility fees. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's
Thank you.
3-0. Thank you.
So the item that had been agenda for tonight is a routine purchase of an important piece of equipment that likely will cause a smile and maybe giggles. It's
we
a
could use it.
sewer rotter. And a sewer rotter, as you might imagine by its name, is used to clear clogged sewer lines. We've all seen plumbers use those in our homes, I expect. I certainly have seen that in my home. But this is a sort of industrial-sized, industrial-strength sewer rotter that the utilities department uses when there are roots growing into sewer lines in town and other kinds of blockages. So the rotter that we had is worn out. We went out to bid to purchase a new one. And actually, I should correct that for the record. Rather than actually bidding it, we used a membership system that does collective bidding on behalf of lots of utilities that we belong to, called Sourcewell. And using that Sourcewell membership for the procurement of this, we have identified the rotter that we need be provided by J.F. McDermott Corporation, and the cost would be $61,824.16. We recommend your approval.
All right. And so we're a little bit over the budgeted purchase.
$60,000 was budgeted, slightly over that. But we would still recommend $1,800 extra to buy the right piece of equipment that's needed. We recommend your approval. The fund has money to cover it.
Comments, questions, anybody?
I'll just note that it really isn't over budget because they had anticipated selling back their old equipment and it was apparently worthless.
So that means there's like an old sewer rotter kicking around that you can take home.
Or bring into the parade on July 4th.
July 4th. Sure.
I wonder how.
We can
How many
only
people
hope.
would be required to carry that?
I think the Strolling the Heifers, that's sooner.
We could gift it. We could gift it.
Yeah.
Enough. Well, I guess I would take a motion if anyone is
I'd love to make
so
a motion.
moved.
I am moving to approve the purchase of a sewer rotter in the amount of $61,824.16 from J.F. McDermott Corporation.
Thank you, Daniel. You have moved to approve a purchase of a sewer rotter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 3-0. Great, thank you. Now I think I can say that item B on the agenda is going to be...
Should we adjourn this?
Oh, gosh, Daniel, thank you. Jan was about to yell at me. May we adjourn?
Please. I move that we adjourn as a water and sewer
The 3
commissioners.
really throws us off.
And I'm
sorry.
sitting in a whole different wing over here.
I know, she's on the wrong
I don't have my
side.
buddy.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning as water and sewer commissioners?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we have shed that burden. And now, can I say that item B is going to be postponed for the amusement of our audience due to, just complications. Item C is something that many of us up here and many of us in our community are very excited about. I'm not going to tell you what it is because...
See if you can guess by looking at who's coming to the table.
Yes. All 3 of you could come up.
So, good evening.
Good evening.
Trying to calibrate my excitement here.
We need something exciting.
Yeah, that's right, in light of all that's going on in the community. But this is a very exciting time for the department and the basic committee because we had a bid opening and we've been raising money for years. and years and years and years. And the time has come where I think we can put the shovel in the ground upon your approval this evening. About 13 days ago, we had bid opening for the skate park project. We received 2 bids. One bid from Parker Construction of Hardwick, Vermont, for $280,000 with deducts of $4,250. I'll go into what those deducts are in just a quick moment. And the second one was from Bernie LaRock and Sons of Guilford for $288,800 with deducts of $4,700. The deducts are something that we can do within the department. It's seeding and loaming and planting some trees around the parking areas and around the walkways, pathways that will be leading to the skate park. When we put this out to bid, as I mentioned there, with the low bid coming in at $280,000 minus those deducts. And then we got to add some few things in because as we sat before you a few months back, we were talking about ways that we can look at the RFP and recalibrate things so that it would fit into the money that we have raised. The basic committee, prior to probably an hour ago, had raised what's in your package this evening of $279,765. Since we were sitting here this evening, we raised another $2,000. So in the last 13 days, the basic committee has raised $9,400, which is about $200 shy of what is needed to meet the contract to Parker Construction. So what I'm asking you this evening is to, there's a lot of different numbers here, numbers of the deduct, but the bottom line, what we're asking you to do is to enter into a contract with Parker Construction. And on top of that, we are asking for the board to consider $10,000 to be used towards a contingency up to $10,000 because this has taken all the money that's been raised, and nobody wants to go into a project not knowing what could happen. And we all know anything can happen at any time. So what I'm requesting of you this evening, as I said, is to enter into a contract with Parker Construction for $275,750. And we're also requesting authorization of the $10,000 to be expended from the capital fund balance if necessary.
Thank you. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm just happy to be here. It's been a long road.
We're happy you're here too.
I'm very happy, and I know I really appreciate everybody sticking with it as their boys have become young men. They're still in the committee, so that's wonderful. And I'm glad we're all at this point.
I don't know about this skate park. I don't know. It's great. I'm glad that I get to be on the board at this time, and maybe we can all get shovels and do that whole thing.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Josh Steele, if you're watching, ye of little faith, you said it wasn't going to happen. I said it would happen, Josh. Now look. So let's go ahead and make that motion. You got a question?
I do. I don't have any paperwork about it. We're supposed to sign something?
No, you're authorizing us to
Oh, very
proceed.
good.
I'll execute the contract and we'll
Go.
get started as soon
Great.
as the circumstances allow.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that we're here because a lot of us have had little parts to play along the years. And back when I first joined the board, we brought it up again. John Allen and I were talking about it a lot, and we committed some town money then. And it pushed us along, and then we stepped back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back type thing. But you guys have been with it from the beginning, literally, and we so appreciate that. And my 2-year-old son, who when I I started getting involved didn't exist, or I had no idea he'd exist. He's excited about it. He's not able to say skateboard yet. But, so I think I speak for a lot of people in saying that thank you. And it's a nice moment we're having right now to focus on something positive and something we can see, hopefully in the warmer months, start to come to fruition. So thank you.
I'm ready to make a motion.
You should do it.
I move to award the bid for construction of the skate park at Living Memorial Park in the amount of $275,750 to Parker Construction, and to authorize an amount not to exceed $10,000 to be expended from the capital fund balance if necessary.
Thank you, Liz. Liz has made a motion to award the bid for the skate park at Living Memorial Park in the amount of $275,750. I almost want to say, and 15 cents, because that used to drive John Allen crazy, to Parker Construction, and to authorize an amount not to exceed $10,000 to be expended from the capital fund balance if necessary. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0.
Aye, thank you very much. Guess it's just we go, woo-hoo, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But you could keep raising money, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no
you never
problem.
know.
Don't let up on that, gas. Let's see. Oh, we have a...
Cemetery bid.
Exactly. I'm sorry, I expected Carol to be with us, but...
Yeah. Carol, we're gonna use
Thank you.
all that excitement.
All of that excitement, I need to stick around.
I'm just happy that wasn't my fault for once.
That's
Thank
not
you,
like me,
Carol.
sorry about that. I'm off my game tonight. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
Okay, so we'll go to a different type of subject. And that's cemeteries. You go
It's
from a high,
Great circle of
a
life.
big circle of life is right.
We're dying for both of them.
Right. Again, I apologize for my early exit. With that, we had a bid opening on March 5th for cemetery maintenance. That is for both Morningside Cemetery and Prospect Hill Cemetery. This year we received 3 bids ranging from $17,000 up to $19,985. As I've mentioned in years past, the cemetery bids are kind of unique because they fall in two different fiscal years. So there is enough money in the current year to get us through April, May, June, and then going forward to the second part of the contract. I'd recommend this evening that we move forward with awarding the contract to Independent Landscape and Property Management of Newfane, Vermont. They are a new company. I checked their references and had a lot of conversation with them about the type of work, what the expectation is, and I do feel comfortable this evening recommending to you that we go forward.
Great. Any questions?
I actually do have questions.
Excellent.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to, but it turns out that I do. So you said, the type of work and the expectations. Can you say a little bit more about the type of work and expectations?
Yeah, what we do, we put this out to bid for, I believe there's 19 mowings over the course of the year. Includes spring cleanup, includes fall cleanup, includes trimming of hedges at the cemeteries. And so we wanted to, we probably have over close to 40 acres of cemeteries that you're maintaining. So, and a lot of these people, some of their big projects are 6 and 7 acre projects. So going from a 6 or 7, your biggest projects are 6 or 7 acres to 40 acres. Part of doing my due diligence was, do you have the equipment that you can go forward and maintain that type of work? But this is mostly just mowing and trimming.
Okay.
And Prospect Hill is probably our most challenging cemetery because the equipment is getting bigger and bigger. And there's still just so much room to get between those headstones, which takes a lot of man hours to get that work done. So by the time you get to one end of the cemetery, it's time to start back over at the other side. I hope that answered your questions. If
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I have an additional one. It's kind of a sensitive question, and I'll just ask it. A community member said to me that they felt that they found a large number of needles in Morningside Cemetery. I wanted to know whether that was accurate, and if so, like what the trends are about that, and what some possible solutions are.
That's true. We do have some encampments that take place throughout our cemeteries. We work with Groundworks from time to time to help us out managing that. And so we do that. We pick them. We do see them. We pick them up and try to make the area, because a lot of people use mostly Morningside, more so Morningside than Prospect Hill, for a lot of exercise. You know, walking the roadways and stuff. And we try to get down there as much as we can as Rec and Parks, but also that's part of the contract when they are down there. And I was pretty upfront with them. I'm like, you are going to see this, and you will need to make sure that you're cleaning it up and training your staff and to do so safely under the guidelines of the Vermont Health Department.
Okay, thanks. And I'm not saying that to necessarily point blame at any place. Like, I think that people in our communities use drugs, and some of those drugs require needles. And if we had safe places for people to do that, and a plan for like where to put that refuse, then maybe we'd handle it better. So, I'm not saying that's an action the board needs to take, but like, I've been spending a lot of time these last few days reading Johann Hari's book, Chasing the Scream, which is about the history of the drug war. And it's a good municipal read. Would recommend.
Okay.
But this bid sounds pretty good to me.
It's a tough transition.
Yeah. What can you do?
So, how good does it sound to you?
It sounds like I would like to make a motion about it.
Oh, that was my need.
So I move to award the bid for seasonal maintenance of Prospect Hill Cemetery and Morningside Cemetery to Independent Landscape and Property Management in the amount of $17,000.
Thank you, Daniel, for making a motion to award the bid for maintenance of Prospect Hill Cemetery and Morningside Cemetery to Independent Landscape and Property Management in the exact amount of $17,000. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Thank you, Jan. And thank you, Kara.
Okay, take two. Thank you.
Now, since we don't have Steve, I believe I'm going to pass it over to Peter for our
Thank
next
you.
agenda item.
Yes, so this one is follow along to something you did really very recently. I think it was the end of January 28th. You authorized that we move forward in partnership with VTrans for the construction of a sidewalk and the modification of the intersection. So the sidewalk will run along the eastern side of Route 142 from the new Hinsdale Bridge, once it's constructed, down the slope there to the intersection with Royal Road, which is the access into Morningside Commons neighborhood. And then this project also involves the modification of that intersection so that the signal will allow, there'll be crosswalks added, or a crosswalk added, and the signal will allow for safe pedestrian crossing of the street. So we've been through the purpose of the project and some of the history of why it's been a tough project to get defined and priced well enough for us to be able to move forward with, but yet earlier this winter we were able to arrive at a way for the town to be able to afford its share of this. When we talked back in January about the fact that our share would be $70,000 out of a total project cost of about $535,000. So the lion's share of this is being paid by the state using federal highway funds. That makes the federal highway fund usage makes the process that's followed to complete the project a bit more cumbersome than it otherwise would be. There's steps that have to be taken and well documented in order to keep the state in good standing with the Fed so that the money keeps coming into Vermont to fund these kinds of projects. We knew that also heading into this, but some of the details weren't known when we first approached you about this. So the memo that I've provided to you dated March 11th provides a little bit more detail about that, about how we're going to share the responsibilities with VTrans. It does not change in any way the financial split. We're still looking at approximately $70,000 as a town cost. We will be providing, we told you back in January, in-kind labor as a contribution to the project. We now have a much better handle on what that in-kind labor is, and I want to be clear that it's substantial. Dan Tyler, who is our superintendent of utilities and highway, will be the project manager for this and is familiar with the requirements, and he, along with others of us on the town staff, will make sure that we dot all the I's and cross all the T's. We think that the substantial investment of in-kind services is well worth it to be able to accomplish this improvement for just $70,000, money which is available for this project in the capital fund. And so we're asking you tonight to authorize me to sign on behalf of the town the project agreement that will, the grant agreement that will be the official kickoff of the partnership with the state.
I just had a question. So Mr. Tyler's services are in addition to the $70,000?
That is correct. Yes, the $70,000 is cash out of our capital account, our capital fund, into the project, and then Dan's time will be substantial. Others of us will be giving less substantial, but still, time to the project because of the fact that it is the procedural requirements are more rigorous than if we were just deciding to do this ourselves.
And I would see his time and input as a benefit to the community because that means that it's built the way we want it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Daniel, any questions?
No, it's a good thing.
I had a quick question. It's already been authorized through town meeting. You made a note of, correct? Because of it's going to be coming from sidewalk.
Yes.
budget?
So to be clear, there is funding for sidewalk construction in the capital fund.
Yep.
Has been for the last 4 years at least. That is authorized by town meeting without it being specific to exactly where those sidewalks will be constructed. We will be using those funds to build a sidewalk in this location.
From last year's town meeting.
Actually, from accumulated funds. So it's because of how the capital fund works. There are times when there's more than just this year's allocation in there because of whatever circumstances led us not to spend all of it last year. But we carefully account for sidewalk money to be spent for sidewalks and bridge money to be spent for bridges and so on.
Just that you don't need the meeting we just canceled.
Correct. We don't need any additional authorization of funds. We have what we need for us to honor our commitment through this agreement to pay $70,000 for this sidewalk.
Great.
Thank you. And if anybody out there is wondering if this would impact our ability to repair and replace existing sidewalks, what would the answer be?
Thank you so much for asking, Tim. The answer to that
I'm
would
sure
be
someone's
that
out there thinking.
in our operating budget, we also have been increasing in recent years the commitment to of funding to repair and replace small sections of sidewalks. So the capital funds, the creation or replacement of significant sections like this one, and the operating fund sidewalk money does like a couple of squares at a time here or there where there's need for safing up a sidewalk.
Thank you.
Well, it sounds like a great idea because it's going to take that Royal Road neighborhood and incorporate more into the community.
Exactly.
And, anticipate the new bridge work and incorporate that into the community as well.
Exactly, and yeah, just speaking to that, it's not just good infrastructure for the safety that it provides. It actually is going to encourage folks to walk. It'll be a connecting section now, so that folks from the neighborhood at Morningside Commons can walk all the way into Main Street, which I'm sure they have done, but they've done at their own peril up until now because of the lack of sidewalk through this section.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or indeed to be able to walk up the bridge, correct?
And up onto the
Because,
bridge to
there are a
catch
couple
the
of
beautiful views.
planned viewing areas.
It's true.
And there's a lot of truck traffic on that road.
But no fishing, probably, from that bridge.
Don't know.
Okay, let's not go there. But another exciting thing for the future of Brattleboro, that's a little bit of a break from our current issues that we're dealing with. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the town manager, Peter Elwell, to execute a grant agreement with the Vermont Agency of Transportation for the transportation project known as Brattleboro STP BP 1917 to provide pedestrian improvements between the Morningside Commons neighborhood and the new Hinsdale Bridge.
Thank you, Liz. Liz has made a motion to authorize Peter Elwell to execute a grant agreement, and that is for providing of pedestrian improvements between Morningside Commons neighborhood and the new Hinsdale Bridge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 3-0. Thank you. We are now listening to Peter once again.
Sorry.
As we are wont to do. We like that. For a procurement of engineering services.
Yes, indeed. So we talked at length during the budget process about the increased burden to municipalities that stormwater management represents based on the adoption of the state's Act 64 to improve water quality throughout Vermont. And this is one of the ramifications of that, implementing additional, very detailed, very complex planning about the work that's going to need to be done in various locations in order to comply with the regulations. So we're asking tonight that you authorize us to spend an amount not to exceed $30,900 to engage Stevens and Associates to provide several different pieces of engineering in different locations for different purposes. So there's actually 5 separate aspects to this engagement, each of them small in their own right, but together they exceeded my $10,000 authority, which is why the matter is before you tonight. I should note, because of one of the other things we talked about related to this broader topic throughout the budget process, is the importance of us preparing to and then moving forward with the creation of a stormwater utility as the funding mechanism for meeting these much more significant requirements for stormwater management. That this is not related to that. This is, more minor investment in specific improvements that need to be done here on the near term that will not be part of the creation of that better mechanism for getting this work done. We do expect to be back in the months ahead. Exactly when is hard to predict right now because of COVID-19. We were preparing to probably bring you something in April on this topic. It's likely to be a little later on now. But we do plan to come to you by, say, summertime with more details about how we would move forward to create that stormwater utility. And at that time, we will need to authorize additional engineering funds to move that process forward. But for tonight, this is specific location, specific work, and we're asking for $30,900, not to exceed $30,900 for this engineering.
Thank you. Would Daniel or Liz like to? Liz, would you like to comment on? Well,
I think
you
it's a
have
great
considerable
idea.
expertise with this area. So.
I've read all
Trying to
5 of
harness
the
our-
applications, and they all looked kosher to me, and I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Good.
As you were mentioning the budget, I was like, oh yeah, the budget. Remember the budget?
Yeah. The trauma we sometimes forget very soon.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, all good.
Well, who would like to make a motion?
I suppose I would. I move to approve proposals from Stevens and Associates for stormwater related services for a fee not to exceed $30,900.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. Daniel has made a motion to approve proposals from Stevens and Associates for stormwater-related services for a fee not to exceed $30,900. All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0. Thank you. And we have not finally, but we do have a financial report to squeeze in.
We do.
Would you like to give
Sure.
us a...
So the financial report is good. I'm going to give a couple of highlights from it as usual, but then I want to speak more broadly to town finances and the circumstances we find ourselves in with COVID-19 again. topic of import in terms of lots of different impacts, one of which will be financial for the town. So through the first, how many months of the year? 8 months of the fiscal year, we are in solid shape where our expenditures are below the threshold for 2/3 of the year. We've spent 64. When you prorate the large annual expenses and create a monthly flow, we're at 64.1% expended. That's about normal for this time of year. We usually end up somewhere north of 96% expended, but not fully expended. That's obviously the way we want to manage the budget. So we're on track for that in the general fund, and likewise in the utility funds and the utility fund and the parking fund, where we are at 63%, 64% in the utility fund, and the parking fund is right at 67.8. It doesn't involve those prorations, but revenues in the parking fund up until this 8th month report have been running well, and so that also was, everything here is a nothing to be alarmed about report. It has also, for folks who may want to look at it on the town's website, it has the normal monthly information about the status of our loans and stuff, but rather than spending time on that, what I'd like to do is put in perspective the fact that, this was chugging along until this past week as a relatively normal year, some unexpected expenses, but also some ways in which we could save on certain things. And the spending was in line with reasonable expectations for being 2/3 of the way through a fiscal year. Our revenues all are in good shape. So in all of the three funds, we were just solid, steady as we go. That has completely changed in this past several days. In parking, because of the decision we made tonight, the revenues are going to be significantly below target. Our expenses will probably be lower than the target, but they won't go down by as much. The largest single expense in the parking operation, just as it is for all of town government as a labor-intensive service delivery organization, are salaries that we're going to be continuing to pay during the time when our revenues are not coming in. And so that's not going to put us in any kind of a precarious long-term position related to the parking fund, but it means we're going to end fiscal year 20 not in the position that we shoot for. We will spend more money than we collect in the parking fund this year. The utility fund may end up the same way. It's got a much more complex set of circumstances there. The action you took tonight related to the utility fund was to suspend shutoffs. We expect that when the May payment comes, actually one thing I'd like to just digress on for a minute. I almost spoke to it when you brought up delinquencies, Daniel, and I thought, no, I can wait for another night. But there's not much to say that we're fortunate about, but in the context of all that is misfortune all over this COVID-19 thing, there are glimmers of bright sides here or there about details of it. And one is the timing of how this happened is coming right after a payment due date. So we just had February 15th as the last time that taxes and utility fees were owed to the town. We had normal collections at that time, no surprises. The next time they're going to be due is May 15th. We don't expect May 15th to be normal. We expect that there's going to be quite a few more people and organizations that are strained and may not be able to make their payment at that time, but we'll see how that turns out. Maybe this will be shorter lived. Maybe it'll be weeks and not months, and folks will get back on their feet and we won't have such an impact. But I think we should expect that there will be more non-payment at the May 15th timeframe than normal. And so we may end up upside down also in the utility fund at the end of the year. But again, in a situation where we've got substantial enough reserves and a solid enough overall financial condition to not be a long-term concern. But in the short term, we may end this fiscal year in a deficit position. In the general fund, the same thing might happen, but we will be carefully and separately accounting for the emergency-related expenses. So in order to make sure that our documentation is really clear for the federal authorities who may be coming to audit our books in order to make refunds available through FEMA processes or other government processes where we might be eligible to receive reimbursement for some of the extraordinary expenses we're going to incur. We will document that well as we go along so as to be able to be well positioned for that recovery after the emergency is over. That will all get reconciled in a way where it will be a general fund burden in the end. There's no other funding source for those expenses other than the grants that we might receive and we might not. And so there's just a lot we don't know about that at this point. We'll keep you well informed as it unfolds. But again, all of that is, the unfortunate but necessary word of warning that while, when this was prepared on March 4th, we were in a normal, solid position. We now have a lot that's unknown, and the likelihood that some of our financial operating condition at the end of this fiscal year will be in deficit. Overall, for the long term, we're in still a very solid financial condition.
So as the state and federal government do whatever they're going to do,
Yes.
Does municipality have people to help us decipher what aid might be coming to us? Is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns
Sure.
a group that would help us make sure that we're getting what we're entitled to? And so
Sure.
forth?
Yes, they will do that. We also, as you know, we're in between finance directors right now, but we have the interim finance director is somebody who actually has audited Vermont books, municipal books. And so she's a person who will be familiar with how, whether it's Irene related or some of the more minor emergencies that have happened, it's not uncommon that on small scale emergencies that are not affecting our whole society like this, that there are, virtually every year, some municipalities that are affected by some smaller scale disasters. And if there's enough impact to those areas from those storms usually or other incidents, then a presidential declaration will make them eligible to receive reimbursement for some of the expenses incurred. And so that's a process we're all pretty familiar with. Fortunately, we don't have to go through it every year. But those of us who've been in municipal government for a while know how those processes work. And to the degree that there are sort of arcane accounting details related to that, we'll have Lori to provide the guidance to the town about how to make sure we first document the information correctly. And then by the time we're applying for reimbursement on any of this, we'll have a new finance director on board.
Super.
Thank you.
Something you mentioned reminded me of a question I forgot to ask a little earlier, so I'd like to just ask that. The employees of the parking,
Yes.
what will they be doing?
So there will be, to some degree, some repurposing, and this is not just in parking. It's kind of spotlight on parking because of the fact that we're going to stop issuing tickets. That particular group is a small group. There are larger groups of employees in some other town departments that will actually be, for a while, not needing to do their normal function. And they will either do sort of special project things that we don't normally have time for that are going to be valuable to the department and to the town more broadly over the longer haul, and or be repurposed to assist with some of the community work that we're doing to, food delivery or other kinds of support for what we ourselves in town government are doing and what others in the community are doing to just keep things happening, to, keep people who have needs supported in the community. So there will be a variety of different ways in which that happens. There will be some days when neither one of those things is necessary, and there'll be employees who are sent home for their own safety and for the safety of others in terms of social distancing, and will be paid for that because we're sending them home. But there will be as little of that as possible in order to make sure that either through regular town operations or through the extraordinary needs that we're facing right now, folks are part of delivering the service to the community.
Great. Yeah, of course, that's the answer we wanted to hear, because Daniel laid out a very good list of all the community efforts happening, and
Right.
If we can plug safely into some of those,
Absolutely. Yep.
that's what we should do. Thank you. Well, thank you for that report.
Do
Anyone
we
else?
need to
Anyone?
have a break for the...
Oh, gosh, I didn't even think of it. Do you folks need a break? You guys? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I know there's a couple people here that have been waiting for the next item, but if we could just take a strict 5-minute break, I think we'll do that, and we'll reconvene at 8:25. Thank you. I wonder whether I should do that for reopening, but you've joined us back after a quick 5-minute break, and we are at letter H, as Daniel loves to say, because he's from a strange part of the world.
Australia.
Well, down under.
We have a couple guests. Would you like to join us up at our table of inquisition? Came up with
Presentation.
table of honor. I'm going to call it that.
That sounds kinder.
Would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. I'm Ryan Kendrick from Groundworks Collaborative.
Thank you.
Josh Davis from Groundworks Collaborative.
Why are you giving me that look? Not everybody who's watching knows exactly who everyone is.
I'm happy to introduce myself. I also live in Brattleboro proudly, and so.
Ditto.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Peter, would you like to?
Actually, I'd like Patrick
Oh, that's
to
right.
give us an overview of the situation. I think while the action item tonight is really clean and clear, it comes with a good bit of history attached to it. So we'd like Patrick to kind of lay that out and certainly hear from the Groundworks leadership about it as well.
And Patrick wrote an excellent memo, so please.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
And thank you, Peter. I'll just take a couple of minutes before we turn it over to Rihanna and Josh, and just talk a little bit about the project, the role that the town has played in this project, actions that the board have already taken in support of the project, and of course, why we're here tonight and the reason for staff's recommendation. So the project is called 54-60 South Main Street. And while the project will do a number of things for the organization in terms of enhancing its efficiency of its operations, its principal function is to develop a permanent home for the seasonal overflow shelter. As many folks will recall, the seasonal overflow shelter for years was situated on Main Street at the Baptist Church. That building was sold. That use could no longer continue at that location. That put Groundworks in a bit of a pinch. The town of Brattleboro worked closely with Groundworks, looking at any number of different locations around town where we might be able to, situate that type of service. They found a temporary solution, temporary in a couple of years, up at the Winston Prouty on the Austin campus. But of course, that too has come to a conclusion, and so almost by process of elimination, their existing location at 60 South Main Street became the focus of the permanent home for the seasonal overflow shelter. So it was at the beginning of 2019 that the board authorized submission of a grant application to the Vermont Community Development Program. The grant application was in the amount of $500,000, at which point in time the town contributed from a revolving loan from program income, $50,000. That was received well by the state, but funded to the tune of $400,000. And because of the challenges around fundraising for this effort, at a subsequent action, the board of the select board authorized an additional supplementary commitment of $100,000, raising the town's contribution on this project from $50,000 up to $150,000. So that's where we were the last time the board took this matter up. The project continued to move forward. Consultants and engineers working for the project secured all the necessary permits, and the only remaining item that needed to be completed in order for the final phase of the project to begin is the remainder of the fundraising. And while their fundraising efforts have been successful and are ongoing, we have reached a point in time where the organization needs to pull the trigger on this project. In order to be ready for next winter, which I believe starts sometime in November, there's a 6 months construction project that needs to occur. And in order for that to happen, Groundworks needs to execute a contract for construction by early April. So we're at a time crunch. We're at a point in time where it's time to decide, are we doing this project? And I believe the answer to that is a wholehearted yes. There is currently, as of the date of the memo in the board's packet, excuse me, about $506,000 of funds remaining to be raised. And we've been working with Groundworks and some of the other project partners to try and go back to each funding source and see if perhaps there's a little bit more that could be had. The town submitted on their behalf a enhancement request to the Vermont Community Development for an additional $100,000. I believe that's likely to be funded, especially if tonight's action moves forward. The USDA and the incentives to be provided by Green Mountain Power are, we believe, all but certain. There are other funding sources that the organization is looking at, some opportunity zone tax credits, and then actually as a worst case scenario, there is borrowing against assets of the organization. And we think with this combination of final pieces of this $3.1 million project, after your action and after the action that will be done up at the state in consideration of the enhancement request, we think that positions Groundworks to be able to execute this contract in order to be ready for next season. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I would just update one thing. Since we submitted this memo to you, we've raised an additional $28,000. So that brings the bottom line to the gap to $478,000. And so, like Patrick said, we've been continuing to fundraise, but really thorough overview both of the history and our current status and the urgency that we have to start this project just as soon as we can in April so that we can be into our new space in November. The schedule is extremely tight.
Do you want to give us just a very quick overview of what the new facility will look like and the services it'll provide?
Sure. It will really bring all of the vast majority of our services under one roof. So we'll have a expanded, adequately sized day shelter. And in that program, we'll have a kitchen so that folks can cook meals. We'll have a pantry that will be stocked. We'll have multiple bathrooms with showers. We'll have office space. We'll have meeting space in the new building. Also upstairs, there'll be a second floor where we'll have our administrative offices. Now that space will convert at night into the shelter space. And so we'll have storage at both ends that will allow beds to come out and unfold, and really we're using every nook and cranny for shelter space as well. Also be a mezzanine in the main area that'll be open, that'll have 4 bunk beds that will be available anytime. Those won't break down and set up again, and so if folks need to sleep during the day, they can access those. 60 South Main, circa 1780s building, will be updated for our HealthWorks team to do their work out of there, and that's our embedded provider from the Brattleboro Retreat, our RN from Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, and our HCRS provider will be working out of there along with our case management team and representative payee program.
Great.
Well, I just wanted to mention you're continuing to fundraise, and you have a matching grant?
We have a matching grant. We do from the
Vermont Country Store.
Thank you, Vermont Country Store.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with this fundraising that we've done, we've almost captured all of that match, but we're continuing to set up matching grants and work with folks to close this gap. We've been really successful.
I just thought that the people in the community want to know in case they want to contribute.
Absolutely. And I would say a deep sense of gratitude both to be back here because the town has already been very generous in the support of this project. The state has already been generous in the support. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're entertaining an additional ask for this project because we think it's really worthy. But I'd also underscore that individuals and businesses in this town primarily have given $1.5 million or pledged $1.5 million to this project, which I think is a testament to the importance of this project, the support of this organization and the support of the people that we serve. So I don't want that to go unnoticed. That's almost 50% of the project is coming from local support. So thanks for pointing that out, Liz.
Thank you. Well, I feel it's someone's duty, I think it'll be mine at the moment, to just point out to people watching that this, if approved, comes from our community program income, which originated originally, and Patrick, tell me if I'm wrong, originally as federal, state pass-through grants. It also is a fund that gets loaned out to businesses, for instance, and gets replenished periodically as they pay off. It's been very successful for multi-purposes in our town.
Yes.
And it is restricted to housing and community economic development.
Correct.
And certainly what you guys provide helps, really you could argue, in both those arenas, but certainly in housing, which is a critical need that we have right now. Especially given recent events, we have all kinds of housing on top of our minds. And people need a home to go home to and sometimes to isolate in. And that's one of the problems we're addressing with COVID-19 right now. Just wanted to throw that out there, that this is not general fund money that we're considering.
Meaning that it's not from the taxpayers.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. Do you anticipate any expansion of services or any changes in that regard coming up?
You want that one?
Want to comment on that at all?
Expansion of services with the new project?
Well, expansion of capability of expanding services.
I think an efficiency that we have, and also, being under one roof is going to dramatically change our programs. Right now, we are pieced out across the community, and so being able to do what we do under one roof is not only going to have great outcomes for the people that we serve, but also the people that work at the organization. In terms of expanding services, oh, that's the question. Yes, absolutely. Talking about having a shelter, we're getting into the spring. Now is the time that we start to close down our seasonal overflow shelter. And for years, we've talked about the hardship that comes with that, the fact that we pass out tents, and that tenting is part of our emergency housing system. And so with this building, we'll be able to go back in our strategic plan. When we started the groundworks, we put in that strategic plan to have a year-round shelter. And so it's been a question of location and then also a question of resources. And with this, we answer the question of location, because this will be our building. We won't be renting from anyone. It'll be a secure building for us to provide our services for years on end. However, it'll be a question of the resources that will be needed to operate this program year-round. Given our current capabilities and support that we're seeing from the community for the work that we do, I foresee in the very near future that that is something that we would be able to provide the community as year-round services.
Great. I think that's great news, because year-round services is not only something that we all want to see, it's absolutely necessary.
Absolutely.
For our clients.
I just have a completely different question,
Yeah.
more about COVID-19. The state sends warming funds, and they're about to end. Will that be extended because of the virus?
Yep, the state task force is looking at the capacity of all warming shelters to extend their services. So last days have all blended together at this point. Friday evening, they surveyed every warming shelter in the state to determine a wide variety of things, and that was one of the questions they looked at, is do we have the capacity to continue to stay open for longer? And we certainly do, and are working closely with our partners at Winston Prouty, where we're not the only tenant at that space, and so far have received significant support, not only from them, but from all of the tenants on the Winston Prouty campus. So I anticipate it's highly likely that that's something that we'll be doing this year.
I think one of the few positive things that could come out of the virus is that the community's understanding of the need for your work.
Well,
Well,
how do we feel?
well indeed.
Motion? Is it my
yeah.
turn?
I think it is.
All right then.
Yeah.
I move to approve a grant in the amount of $100,000 from the town's revolving loan fund program income to Groundworks Collaborative in support of the project located at 5460 South Main Street to establish a permanent seasonal overflow shelter.
Thank you. Liz has made a motion to approve a grant in the amount of $100,000 from our revolving loan fund to Groundworks Collaborative in support of 5460 South Main Street and their permanent seasonal overflow shelter. All those in favor?
Aye.
None
Thank you.
opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your work.
And thank you, Patrick, for the support.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
We have a small grant to reallocate.
We do.
Item
So
H.
it's a reallocation of Homeland Security funds that we were made aware of. So we applied for a very specific, very small amount, $1,600, to enable the town to purchase 2 multi-purpose devices that are used when doing swiftwater rescue activities for the fire department. We were in front of you, if this sounds eerily familiar, it's because it was only about a month ago we were in front of you to ask for permission to apply for this, but almost as soon as we sent in the letter, they sent one back and said, yes, you got it. And so what's before you tonight is the acceptance and appropriation of a grant for $1,600 from the Vermont Department of Public Safety for the town to buy those 2 multi-purpose devices.
Great.
They sound very useful.
They are, in multiple ways.
Yes. Let's get one.
At least as useful as they were
Well, 2. Let's get
just
2
a
of
few
them.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would. I move to accept and appropriate a $1,600 reallocation of 2017 funds as a state Homeland Security grant from the Vermont Department of Public Safety.
Great. Thank you for that motion to accept an appropriate $1,600 reallocation of funds as a state Homeland Security grant from the Vermont Department of Public Safety. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's 3-0. Jane. So we get to committee matters. We had some appointments to interview committee members earlier today. However, none of them could make it.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Well, if I may, so because the individuals weren't able to be here to be interviewed, and because we've temporarily suspended the operation of town committees, and because this particular committee has enough members on it right now so that if we resume that activity before you make these appointments, they still can function, it might be appropriate that you postpone action on these applications until such time as the emergency has settled down and the individuals can come be interviewed by you and you can make an informed choice.
I was thinking that too. Was anyone else?
Yes.
Peter's a mind reader.
And we do have 4 applicants for 1 vacancy, which
You
is
do, which is
terrific.
unusual. Yep.
We love that. Would anyone like to announce other? We don't have to make a motion to do that, do we? No.
You can just agree to move past it. Yes.
Do you
So
wanna add the
agreed.
tree to
Consensus.
that? Do you want to add the tree to that announcement?
To the announcement? Sure, since it's still open.
Since it's still
Yes,
open.
please. Yep.
Sure. I don't mind doing it. Would you like me to read the vacancies?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So we do have, people are invited to apply for some remaining committee vacancies, one of which is still the Tree Committee, which has 1 vacancy. And then there is the ADA Committee has 1 vacancy. All of these have, oh no, sorry. The Arts, I was trying to make it simple. The Arts Committee has 1 vacancy. The CPCC, which is the Citizen Police Communications Committee, has 1 vacancy. The Conservation Commission has 1. The Developmental Review Board alternate has 2. And the Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood is also searching for a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed inspector, so, but just one.
Maybe there's a squirrel somewhere.
I don't know what, I guess it's getting late and I'm getting.
Yeah, getting punchy.
May I speak to K&L, please?
Oh, yes, certainly.
We're almost done.
Certainly.
And the last two items on the agenda tonight, both related to annual business that is done around the time of town meeting, and both of these actually relate to the timing of town meeting, and so they have become moot tonight by the virtue of the action that you had to take to cancel
Indeed.
town meeting. So,
Indeed.
unless you have something else you want to talk about tonight, we're done.
No, unless there's any other commentary, that brings us.
I move to adjourn.
Oh. Good idea.
Liz has moved to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Thank
Wash
you
your
very
hands.
much. And Pretty
Thoroughly.
TV
And
for
thoroughly.
providing safe viewing for all of our citizens.